Welcome to the Strong, Single and Human podcast, a real look at single parenting, how to navigate the ups and downs of life with kids on your own while keeping sane. We cover all manner of subjects from domestic violence, dealing with childhood trauma, through to fussy eaters and how to help your kids become resilient. I'm your host, Claire Martin. Welcome. This week's guest, Reneé Rodriguez, is a highly skilled and passionate individual dedicated to empowering women and advocating for their rights in family court cases. With a career spanning over 25 years, Reneé has emerged as a prominent figure in the field of custody battles, specialising in supporting women in their pursuit of physical and legal custody. Her unique approach is to teach clients to adopt a noble warrior mindset when entering the courtroom. By instilling a sense of strength, resilience and determination in her clients, Reneé empowers them to confidently present themselves as the healthier, more capable parent during custody disputes. Throughout her career, Reneé has honed her skills and knowledge in various domains, including narcissistic personality disorder and domestic violence advocacy. Recognizing the challenges faced by many parents dealing with difficult co-parents exhibiting narcissistic traits, Reneé has invested considerable time and effort in understanding the intricacies of this personality disorder. Her expertise in narcissistic personality disorder equips her with the necessary tools to guide and support people in navigating the complexities of such cases effectively. Reneé has also become a trusted advocate for victims of domestic violence. She understands the unique struggles faced by people in abusive relationships and helps them develop strategies to protect themselves and their children. Reneé's deep commitment to promoting awareness about domestic violence and advocating for its victims has led her to become a respected figure in the field. This is the Strong, Single and Human podcast. Hi, Reneé Rodriguez. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm glad to be here.
No, I am intrigued with what the subject matter that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about family court cases, and I haven't really been to a family court situation because I'm very lucky in the fact that I didn't have to go through that. But you actually deal with so many people who do deal with family court, and you know how they get through a family court situation, don't you?
Yes, I do. I did go through my own.
Yeah. Well, that was what I was going to ask, right? How did you get into this line of work? So tell us a bit more about you and how you decided this was what you wanted to do.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. So I was in a situation that I didn't know I was in, which isn't uncommon. You know, I had a lot going for me. A lot was going well. I had a company that was on the rise, a theater company. I was doing a lot of things very different from what I was doing before. I was leading a team of people at a corporation. I was being a true Gemini and just working from early in the morning till late at night and full of energy. And I met someone and I was with him for a couple of years. At a certain point, we decided to have a child, and we did. And there were sort of some strange things that had started happening, maybe right around the first year of our relationship. And then after I became pregnant, there was a real turnabout, just a different person who I saw. A lot of cruelty, a lot of things. I was walking on eggshells. I never knew when he was going to be angry. I never knew when he was going to decide that he wasn't going to talk to me for 3 or 4 days, even though by this time we lived together in New York City. And I started seeing a therapist. I had seen therapists before. I'm a big fan of seeing one, but I hadn't seen one in a while. And so what's interesting about that was that I felt that I needed one, urgently needed one all of a sudden. I'd been meaning to get one for several months, but then suddenly there was this impetus. And I felt like I wanted to figure out how to help our relationship, how to help my relationship succeed with this man who was to be the father of our child.
And was this before you had given birth? Was this?
Yes.
Oh, so okay. Wow, you were full on in it.
Because it was that much of a 180, right? Sure, there were the red flags, but what's interesting is that in spite of, I'm a smart enough person, and then these red flags, I was getting on in years, as they say. And so I thought, well, maybe I've been too picky. Maybe I've been too fill in the blank. And so I was willing to take the red flags that I had seen, and I was willing to say, well, these are quirks. I shouldn't be so judgmental. That's probably what I have been in the past. And I shouldn't be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And so I continued forth. Mm-hmm.
This resonates so much, because I've spoken to you about all of this, and so I know where you're coming from, right? Because it resonates so much with my situation, and you sit there and go, oh, it's a red flag, but then you go, but am I just being too picky? Am I being a bit hard? And they deal with the red flag in such a way that you go, oh, maybe it's just me. My world fell apart when I was 6 months pregnant. So it's interesting. That's why I asked because I went and saw a therapist after I'd given birth, because I thought I was the insane one and that I needed to do something. And it's interesting that you say similar, but before you'd given birth. So sorry, carry on.
Echoes, Claire, echoes, definitely. And that's sort of what I went through, because, I now know that once a woman becomes pregnant or gets married, once there's that event where you're locked in, then it becomes that 180. And when I found out that I was pregnant, it was after I had a miscarriage, which a red flag there was that he was very cold about it. It was a dramatic miscarriage. It was a dramatic miscarriage. I can remember, and I do want to give a trigger warning, I can remember that I had taken my jeans and was kneeling over the bathtub. This is such a tableau for me, with the water running on cold, because I'd always learned that you use cold water to rinse out blood. And I was rinsing out blood-soaked jeans from the miscarriage. And he kind of walked in and asked me what I was doing. And I said I was cleaning up the miscarriage. And he turned around and walked back out. Wasn't a big deal for him. And so I stayed, and we sort of, I think the next pregnancy was a surprise. And I remember when I told him that I was pregnant, being someone who's in theater and who has auditioned many actors for the productions I've put on, actors have to, many people might know this, but if you don't, it's kind of interesting that actors are required to, at that time, you would do a 90-second monologue, and there would be a timer going off, and you would have to stop talking if that timer went off. And so an interesting and fascinating thing was that you began to be able to count seconds without realizing you were doing it. And so you could tell when somebody was coming on 90 seconds without ever looking at a clock.
Oh my God.
You could tell when, like, a monologue that I was directing, if I wanted it to be 10 seconds long because of the scene, I knew exactly what 10 seconds was. And you just did. So it's interesting that I can say with certainty that I told him I was pregnant, and in the space of 8 seconds, I saw the realization, and that was the last I saw of the facade, at least, that I was dating. After that, the cruelty just kicked in that fast.
Wow.
And there were some
Wow.
extremely cruel things. And so that, to come full circle, is, it wasn't so long after that. It was a month after that. It was after 4 weeks of cruelty that I thought, well, let me get a therapist, because gosh, this pregnancy is really affecting him so much, right? Looking for those
Yeah.
excuses, looking for the
Yeah.
reasons for the insane type of treatment that I was getting, right?
Yeah.
So that's when I started seeing the therapist. And to fast forward through all the cruelty, I mean, certainly there are instances that I can talk about that people might be able to relate to, in the hopes that they'll understand that there is a next chapter. There is abundance after you leave this. But I remember there was one point we were in Central Park in New York City, and we were going to see a play of, I think, a friend or a cousin of mine. I can't recall exactly, which is funny because I can visually remember a lot of things about it. And we had entered into the wrong side of Central Park, as it turns out. And anybody who is familiar with Central Park knows what that means.
Oh, it's
And
massive.
so it was right. And it was it was like 92 or 95 degrees. And I think it was about 8 months pregnant at the time. And we were going to an outdoor production. And he was very angry that we were doing it for whatever reason. There was always a reason for him to be angry.
Yeah.
And so I was 8 months pregnant, and I was carrying his backpack and my backpack, the cooler, another bag of food, the chairs. I had everything like a pack mule over my shoulders and on my back, 6 months pregnant, while he lightly walked with, I think, maybe a satchel, if anything. And he didn't even stay in line with me. He was like, honestly, about 200 feet ahead. He was so angry. And I'm traipsing over hills and grass because he's not following the path. He's cutting through grass, which is a small mercy in terms of less, and a difficulty because I'm navigating grass.
And you're pregnant.
8 months pregnant, 8.5.
It's not as though
like
you're
that.
not showing, and you're like, it's when you're 8 months pregnant, you're like a beached whale.
It's like, and I was particularly big, and it was, and we had gone in on the east side, and we needed to get to almost entirely the west side, really. I'm not even exaggerating on that one. And so it took us, I think it was 30 to 45 minutes of and I had to keep up with him because I was afraid of how angry he would be if he lost sight of me.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, I used to run teams, and I ran a company that he brought down. But here I was thinking, what can I do to make sure he's not even madder at me than he is now for making him come to this play that I wanted to see of my friend or cousin. And then we finally got there, and I put everything down, and he ignored me the rest of the time. But this is just one example of what was almost daily type of, I would sometimes call it hazing, and that's sort of what I went
What do you
through.
mean by hazing? Just like
hazing is like, it may be, and you'll forgive me if this is an American term or just a general term that unfortunately is an American thing, but there's like college fraternity houses do like cruel things to their recruits to see if they can hack it and get into the fraternity, if they're worthy of the fraternity. And so they're very, very cruel things, to the point where inevitably every September, October, there's articles in the news about another 17, 18-year-old child who has died while being,
trying to get into
hazed, really. You're trying to get into a fraternity. So we use that term perhaps a little more generally than we should, but I don't think I'm using it wrongly in this case.
No.
So
that was your life. So that was your life then with your husband?
Yes.
Did you marry him?
So we never married. We did get engaged. Thank goodness we never married. But there came a moment where I was talking to a friend, trying to get her advice on what can I do? And she said, can I just say something to you? I think you're being mentally abused.
Yeah.
And I said, what does that mean? And yet it kind of resonated. I almost didn't need the meaning, but I wanted to know what was the definition of that. She said, look, I just think you're being mentally abused.
Yeah.
So the next day I got on the phone with my therapist because he didn't know I had one, and I had an appointment with her, and he was unexpectedly home. So I told her, I said, I'm too scared to come see you. And I said, can I ask you something though? Do you think I'm being mentally abused? To which she replied, yes. And I said, my God, why didn't you say that to me before? And she said, because you can't really hear that until you're ready to.
Yeah.
And so what I was doing was I was encouraging you and teaching you how to use your voice with him and see what was going on, so that when the time came, you could accept that. And the fact that you're asking me this and telling me that your friend said you were mentally abused, you're ready to hear it. Yeah, very, very, very much so.
Wow.
So within a week or two, I left him, and to give you bullet points from there, it was very ugly when I left him. And
it always
I started
is.
talking to lawyers.
Yeah.
It always is.
And it always is. So then you started talking to lawyers.
I started talking to lawyers.
To sort out access and things.
To figure that out. What is the timeshare going to be? What is the parenting timeshare? Or what should I do? Right. And when you're being abused, what you want to do is you want to say, what are the chances I can just erase this person from my child's life? Because it's not that you want to get rid of their father. It's that this is not the father that you would want any child to have. And that's where I was in that moment. Right. That's where I was in that moment.
And also my view is, if they can abuse a person that they deem to love, and I doubt that love, but how are they going to abuse my child? Mm-hmm. How are they going to mentally manipulate and abuse my child? And I don't want that for my child.
And the court doesn't really see it that way.
No.
And I sort of began to learn that from the attitude is, and this is really quite global, this attitude, is that, well, of course they're going to abuse a romantic partner, and that's wrong, but nobody would ever abuse a child. And he himself says that he would never do that. And this is what the family court tends to eat up, generally speaking, right? So you asked me how I got into this line of work. Well, once I did settle on a lawyer, I saw a gap there. And I was like, I have a good lawyer, and I'm a strategist by nature. I've worked in consultancies. And I kind of felt like something's missing. And at that time, because this was over 10 years ago, so it's hard to imagine. But when I went searching on the internet, it was like mental abuse, and I found a few things. Now you can't go on TikTok without being inundated with information, thank goodness. But at that time, just 10 years ago, I was really searching hard, and I found one Facebook group where they were talking about mental abuse, and I was getting help for mental abuse. But for some reason, it got me only so far. And I couldn't figure out what was missing until I came across Melanie Tonya Evans. And when I came across her, I thought, this sounds kind of weird to me, but she does a narcissistic abuse recovery program. And I thought, what is narcissistic abuse? I got on her list. When I read her stuff, I said, I know what narcissistic abuse is, my life. And so I discovered her, and then on that forum, I discovered Tina Swithin. And Tina Swithin is the head of One Mom's Battle. At that time, 10 years ago, I got in touch with Tina, and I said, look, you do something called divorce coaching. What is that? What is that? So she talked to me, and I ended up hiring her. And that was when I first understood how much a coach can change the trajectory of your case. And that's what Tina did. Just having her there, in spite of having a very good lawyer and a very good plan with good evidence, Tina changed the trajectory of my case. Right? It was amazing. So somewhere along the way, Tina and I worked together, and we had what's called a custody evaluation in my area. There's a lot of different terms for this, but it's all the same thing. And we got to a point where she said, look, there's two coaches who actually do just this because of how crucial this is for your case. She said, I'm not equipped to do this, so I'm going to get in touch with them and see if they'll take you as a favor to me. I know they're full. She came back and said, one of them is retiring because she just can't take the horror stories anymore. The other
God.
is quite wealthy and just is getting tired. And so she said, the truth is that why don't you just try something given your experience with strategy and your strategic sense? And let's just kind of go over it. And I can go off of what I know these two coaches do. I put some stuff together in a certain way and I showed
Yeah.
it to her. I was thinking strategically. She looked at it and she said, Renee, I have never seen anything like this in my life.
Wow.
She says, I've never seen it laid out so clearly. And she said, you should be doing this as a coach.
Yeah.
To which I said, slow your roll. I'm in a court case. But she got me thinking. So
Yeah.
a year and a half later, I started up, because everyone was demanding the templates. Tina was kind of telling people, I was spreading them around and I was giving these things away for free. And somebody said, Renee, you can't be giving these things away for free. They're worth way more than we're paying our lawyers.
Wow.
So I started to do a business. My therapist was kind of like, you should not be doing this as a side business. You should be doing this as a business. And I was kind of like, there's nothing like this really what I do. And they were kind of like, there's a need for it then, isn't there? And that's how I started the company.
Wow. And the company basically helps people who are going through family court prepare to go through family court like you needed.
That's right. That's right. We help, and specifically what we do is we help protective parents who are in a custody battle with a high conflict co-parent to get the custody arrangement that's best for their kids. And that is through the preparation. There's never any guarantees with your lawyer with us, but we do have a great track record. And I think it's because of my strategy background and because I get it and I've been through it.
Yeah.
Unlike, more and more people are getting on board, but some of those people end up coming to me because they're talking to lawyers thinking, well, a lawyer doing this can help me, a retired judge doing this can help me. But the truth is we've got something, and I'm grateful to be able to lean into that and compartmentalize it to be able to help people. And so that's what we're doing, is we're helping people.
So why is it that lawyers are falling short? And falling short is probably the wrong word, but you may have a fantastic and awesome lawyer, right? And they might be the best in their field, but you still lose a court case. You still lose access to your child, or your child is put into a dangerous situation because the courts. Why is that?
Yeah. Well, and I'm always generally speaking when it comes to court, because there are always exceptions to the rule, right? The bell curve. And what I tell clients is it doesn't matter whether you are paying your lawyer $175, we'll say USD, or $1,000 per hour. The clients are still coming to us with the same problems, which is my lawyer doesn't seem to get it, or my lawyer seems to get it, but there's no real strategy here. And I always remind people that when people go to law school, you have to remember that your lawyer is your representative in court. And what I liken it to is pick your favorite law show. Let's pick the wildly popular Law and Order, right? Yeah. You watch Law and Order, and the charming, wonderful, beautiful, or handsome lawyer spends an entire episode dedicated, losing sleep, eating with colleagues and talking about your case and looking up case law and talking to their boss. And, it's this very romanticized picture of a lawyer who has dedicated an entire episode to you and comes out the other end, most likely winning. And if they lose, they are angst ridden and losing sleep and will never forget you. And that's not the reality. If you have a good lawyer, then they're going to represent you well in court, right? You and the other 30 to 40 clients they've got. It's not, you don't get an entire episode with them, right? Yeah. So they go to school, they go to law school, and they learn what I almost did, which is it's three things basically that they're learning that we need them to know, that they need to be good at for us in order to represent us in court. And that is process, procedure, and case law. Those are the things that they lean into to help you win your case. But generally speaking, there's no strategy 101 course. And so
No.
many times when lawyers are talking to you, they're talking about tactics that they've learned. Or if you have a talented lawyer, they might have a real strategic sense. But for the most part, you are leaning into these lawyers for them to represent you in court and lean into that process and procedure and case law. But here's the thing. Your lawyer, no matter what you're paying them, is only as good as what you give them. And that's the gap that we fill.
And that's the key, isn't it? That is the key. And also, though, I have to say, only as good as, so if you're called into court to actually represent yourself to the judge and state evidence and things like that, that also could affect your case as well, couldn't it? Like how you are and things like that, right? So your lawyer are good on those three, those three things, right? But also they're your lawyer. They're not a parent of your child.
They're not your savior. They're not your savior.
No, that's right. So they can only do, like you said, how you can prepare them for it. So what do you as an individual then need to do so if you're having to go to court for access, for sorting out finances and bits and pieces like that, and 9 times out of 10 with family court, it's access to your child, right? And it's situations and circumstances that either a court plan hasn't I say court plan and it's not court plan, but the court my brain, it's Friday and my brain is fried. But the court documents, basically, there's been a breach of the court documents for access or whatever. And 9 times out of 10, you're going either to agree the court documents and access to your child, or you're going to court for a breach of those court documents and therefore wanting to bring it to the court's attention, et cetera, et cetera. So what do you need to really prepare when you're going to family court? Because family court is very different from criminal court. Thank God.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But what do you need to prepare? How do you need to prepare?
Yeah, I like that you're saying how, there's really three, when I'm working with clients, there's really 3 areas that we're always focusing on, and that's strategy, mindset, and evidence. And usually when we're talking with clients, they're eager to get the strategy, they're eager to work at the evidence, or they feel like they're a hot mess. And so they have the evidence, but they don't know how to put it together. So we like to say, there isn't one more than the other. It might seem like you lead with evidence. It might seem like you need a strategy. You can take your pick about what you lead with, but the truth is that you have to have all 3 and you have to have them done well. So if I were to broad strokes what that means for strategy, evidence, and mindset, for strategy, you're really looking for having a strong foundation of a plan. And that's why you have to help your lawyer, because your lawyer, like I said, you could have a pro bono lawyer, you could have someone who is legal aid. They can be just as good as the person you're paying, an incredible amount of money for, if you're partnering with them. So you are probably going to be able to come up with a strategy almost better than your lawyer, but you want to partner with your lawyer, because what lawyers are very good at, if they're good at their job, if anybody's good at their job. So if a lawyer is good at their job, they're going to be good at pivoting. They're going to be good at tactics, right? And tactics are a part of strategy. Pivoting is a part of strategy, but it's not the whole strategy. No. And in truth, I know lawyers use the term strategy. And like I said, some of them do have a natural sense, but it would behoove you as the client to understand that the best strategy is going to be you and your partner's heads put together. Okay. So your strategy is going to come from what you've determined your main concerns to be. Because when you are being abused by someone who is usually a narcissist, whether it's emotional abuse, physical abuse, spiritual abuse, coercive control, anything in between, all of it, then there's a lot there, like more than it. If you've been documenting that type of thing, as we lean into evidence, you've got all this stuff, you've got all this information, you've been documenting, journaling, capturing, recording, photographing, collecting. You can't walk in with, 10 thick binders of evidence and say, boy, have I got something to show you. in reality, and Tina loves to say this, and I actually agree with her now, that I've been in this for a while. For every 100 pieces of evidence you've got, you're probably going to use 5 or less. And that can be hard for some people to hear, because everything you've collected is valid. Everything you've collected, everything you've got shows the insanity, the cruelty, the abuse. But the court is not really receptive to all of that. First off, they just can't handle it logistically.
It's overload.
And
it's overload.
It is. It is for anybody. When parents are sitting down to organize the evidence, it's triggering and it's horrible. It's almost paralyzing for many moms and dads, right? So that's sort of a tricky part there. But you're going to categorize, you're going to take all of that evidence and you're going to figure out, if I make categories for this, and let's say I have 11 categories. If I'm to categorize, if I'm to make buckets, I've got 11 buckets. Then you're going to look at the most compelling evidence you've got. So if you've got a bucket that only has 2 pieces of evidence, but man, is that evidence powerful, that might well be one of your categories, in spite of the fact that you have 200 pieces of evidence for another category. Let me give examples of the categories. The categories might be neglect, substance abuse, non-collaboration, poor judgment. They might be any number of things that are your main complaints about why you should be the one to get the custody arrangement that you're asking for, right? So the evidence piece then, right? We've already talked a little bit about that. So the other bit of that is you want to make sure that you're following the rules of evidence. And that's really going to vary. And I'd love to say that it varies by country, or it varies by, this, that, or the other thing, but it usually varies by state or province. All right. But even then, you want to look at your jurisdiction. It's, some people kind of say, well, how can you work with me when you're in New York City? To which I always answer, when I go to the family law conferences, I'm talking to people from Australia and Canada and Singapore, which is why we have clients in all of these areas from all kinds of countries that are presenting. It's a group think. Family court is a big group think thing. They're coming in and they're all listening to the same information. They're all listening to the same plenary sessions. They're all teaching each other and doing much of the same thing. So when we talk about these things, we do have to say we're generally speaking, and we're not in a position where we can give legal advice, but we can strategize into what we know the family courts across the world do, and their tendencies in the countries that buy into it. So then the last piece would be mindset. And with mindset, we at, Best Foot Forward, or the Custody Blueprint, which is the other moniker we go by, we like to focus on really 2 prongs of mindset. One of them is, are you appearing anxious? Are you feeding into his or her, mental instability accusation, anxiety disorder accusation? What are you showing the court professionals when you meet with them? What are you showing the judge, the referee, the crown when you're meeting? So you see what I'm saying? So it's like, you basically have to be careful of what you're presenting. The other prong is, how is your parenting being presented, and how is your parenting being criticized? How can we overcome that? Dr. Emma Katz talks a lot about how very recently she put something out about how bad mothering is something that is brought into the courts. She's a bad mother because she did this, that, or the other thing. These things were fine while you were married to them. Right. Yes. But now all of a sudden it's weaponized, what you're doing. And what you're doing is not even worth being weaponized. There's nothing wrong with it at all. And yet they're somehow being twisted. So we take a look at things that are very valid parenting, very natural, nothing wrong with them. And we say, okay, what you're doing is fine. You really are a great mom. We're not just saying that. Here's what they're going to say about the fact that you took the phone away at this time, the fact that you put a parenting app on their iPad, the fact that you picked them up from school early, the fact that you didn't take them to school when they had a stomachache. Here's how we're going to overcome that. And here's how I want you to word this in the future. And so we go in and we safeguard parents from their parenting decisions being twisted against them to the best of our ability. And so those are the 3 prongs of of the work that we do, and what you need to be thinking about as you go in. These are the 3 things that, as you're building your case, you need to keep in mind equally.
And mindset, like I know we've said there are three things, right? And the first two, I think, are the easier ones. Getting a strategy and collecting and having the evidence. I think if you are in, and you've been in that situation, and I've been in that situation, and even though I'm 6 years out, I still collect evidence. I've never been to court. I've never had an issue, but I still collect evidence because I'm 6 years out, and you just don't know when the situation is going to change, right? And I'm hoping I've set boundaries and focus on it just being whatever is the benefit for my son. It is not anything against me or my ex-partner. It is what benefits my son. But those things, strategy and evidence, I think are the easier parts. Mindset is massive. And I have seen people here in Australia, friends of mine, who have gone through family court, who have had their parenting questioned and twisted, just exactly like you've said. And they've came out the other side, right? And they've gone, I'm not a good mother. I'm not a good. And they've doubted everything that they've done and gone, oh, I'm not a good mother. And like enabled their ex-partner to, in meetings with schools and with various different other people like psychs and things like that, to manipulate them still 5-6 years out and affect them vastly by just making a comment in a meeting that they've had at the school about their child. It's amazing. So
No, that's absolutely right. And I think, you know, really quickly, the fact that you're still documenting and it's about the child and not about getting something or looking for gotcha moments, that's exactly the approach from start to finish, whether you're still in the battle or not. Regarding the bad mothering, to me, it feels like there's two pieces to it. There is what I find sometimes even within myself, but definitely deeply within the parents we work with. And let's go ahead and use the term mother right now. And I just want to give a nod to the fact that statistically speaking, both men and women can be abused, but
I agree.
Statistically speaking, the vast majority of people who are abused are female. So for now, let's just use the language mom, recognizing that dads can be abused as well.
Definitely.
So the moms then that we work with, there's so much of two different types of guilt. One is the kind that we've been talking about, which is, oh, did I do the wrong thing? I'm now doubting myself. But the other is such guilt and regret for not having seen things sooner, for not having walked away sooner. I have had so many moms say, I gave my child the father that they have. And at the same time that they can say that doesn't make sense because without him, I wouldn't have this amazing child.
Oh, agreed.
But yet there's that trying to reckon, right? There's that attempted reckoning between I did this, but thank God, but oh my God. And it's a horrible space to be in, to feel guilt and shame for having endured, when the reality, Claire, the reality is that there is an amazing strength in people who can look at such a damaged person and say, maybe there's a way we can make this work. Yeah. I'm willing to go to, there's strength in saying, I'm willing to do co-parenting with you. I'm willing to do relationship counseling with you before you leave, just as there's strength in saying, you know what, co-parenting counseling is definitely no longer the right thing for me or whatever. Yeah. It's the journey where you're at, and it's very, very hard to get over the shame and guilt of having, and I'm using quotes here, stayed with an abuser because of the lack of understanding of what abuse really looks like, of the fact that it's so gradual, so subtle, that you don't know you're being abused until you're in it, until you're married, until you've had children.
Well, and it's interesting that you had to ask your therapist, am I being emotionally abused? Because my way of dealing with the situation was, I sat there and said, I don't want to destroy my son's life by splitting up with my ex. And my therapist turned around to me and went, this isn't all on you, you know. This this is 50-50, right? You're both parents in this relation, in this child's life. And it's not you who isn't coming forward and taking responsibility and doing X, Y, and Z. You're not ruining your child's life as such. And I had to take a step back and sort of look at it and go, wow, okay, never thought of that before. But yeah, so yeah, it's amazing. And you're right. It's amazing how these things occur. And I've managed, right? You've had awesome career managing teams of people, etc. I've had an awesome career. I managed projects globally, multi-million dollar, I was managing teams of 40 people, etc. Yeah, I still found myself in a situation of being abused, which just blew my mind. But yeah, no, it's crazy. It's crazy. And just going back to the courts and things like that, right? Like, I've recently had a friend of mine who was told she's potentially got PTSD because of her court case. Is that something that really, like, we have to be cognizant of the fact that domestic violence, and it is domestic violence, whether it be emotional, physical, or financial or whatever, right? It's domestic violence, and the court case that follows it can contribute to PTSD.
Yes.
And there are effects of that can then, the effects of PTSD can affect your court case as well, though, can't it?
Yes. Yeah. It's, litigation abuse is, I would lump it under, I think a lot of experts would lump it under post-separation abuse. Yeah. And most parents, most moms will say that the post-separation abuse is actually worse than living with them in some ways, because they no longer need to lean into the facade at any point except when they're in front of the judge or the court professional. But when they're with you, man, they don't need to love bomb you for anything. Now they can just be on the attack and they can punish you. I have a background in psychology, my family does. And I was having a discussion with a family member who does not specialize in family or domestic abuse or anything. He has worked with some, very at-risk populations for sure, but not specifically what we're talking about here. And so we were discussing it, I asked, generally, so what's your perspective on this? And he said, okay, if I'm not standing in it, if this is not the work I do, but I'm looking at narcissism and I'm going off of what I've been trained in it and what I know about it. He said, the problem you've got with narcissism, the thing you have to understand is that facade is not just, there's memes and there's pictures, and we use this all the time, where we picture there's a mask, and when we take it off, there's a handsome man behind it or whatnot. And he says, so let's take away that simplistic picture for a minute, because there's value in that simplicity, but let's add some layers to this onion, right? And he says, what if that facade is his entire being and not just some mask that he's put there? It is his entire being for what he wants to get, what he wants to obtain. The fact that he cannot be comfortable in his own skin, in his own body. And so he needs this facade, which is actually just his entire being in some ways, except his core. All right. Let's say that instead of a mask that slips off, we've got his entire being except his core. And that's the facade. All right. Now you take somebody who has taken that facade and they see through it and they even rip it away. And at the core is nothing, just a naked child. Yeah. Right.
That was what I was going to say.
If that's what's at the core and you have revealed that, this individual will spend the rest of his life punishing you for trying to bring that to light. He will destroy you to do so if he is of that metal, and he will absolutely do everything in his power to put that back up, which he will easily be able to do for his next victim. He will easily be able to do for the guardian, for the judge, for the referee, for the magistrate, whoever. But you know who he is. You can reveal him to his own children. Not that healthy parents are bad-mouthing the other parent, but he's aware of that. He will forever punish you for pulling that away so that he had to put it back on, for seeing through him. Because as you know, my relative explains, you have destroyed this person. And he will destroy you for doing that. And really all you've done is said, no, thank you. I don't want to be treated this way. And that's all it took for him to say, well, then you will be punished. You will be punished until the end of time.
Because he's lost that control, hasn't he?
That's exactly it.
It's
and so
it's frightening.
You've taken that
away
from them.
How do you deal with somebody like that in court, though, right? Because how do you how do you hold yourself? Have you got tips for how somebody would hold their body, hold them, how they speak and things like that? Because it is like, at the end of the day, right, we're going into a court where you've got lawyers and a judge, right, who've never met you before, right? They don't know your situation and circumstance. Like you've said, they're dealing with 30, 40 other cases as well. They might all be different as well. And they hear probably a million different stories all the time, right? So they have to sit there and basically try and pick out, like, the evidence and what's true and what's not, I suppose, and what's best for the child, right? And I suppose if you're scared, anxious or whatever, that comes across in the court.
Yes, and there's so much that I can talk about that you brought up, but I'll sort of just get at the heart of what you're asking, which is, you know, how do you stand there? How do you appear in court, right?
Well, yeah, how do you deal with it? Because there's a mental conversation going on in your head, right? And yes, I've been to court once to get an intervention order, and I went on my own. I had no lawyer. It was the most horrendous, eye-opening experience ever in my 52 years of life, right? And I'd never been to a court. I'd never even been to jury service, right? So I didn't even know what I was to expect, right? And I'm sure, even though I can hold myself in talking to CEOs and directors and things like that, I'm sure my anxiety came across in that court.
So what I would posit is that there's really one or another thing that is running through your mind as there's a million things that are running through your mind, as you say, but I think at the bottom of it is that, yes, for many moms, I'm in the same room as my abuser. But I would say that what runs deeper than that is, am I going to lose my children today?
Yeah.
And that really is at the core of what we find when we're working with parents, that they're wondering. And we certainly have a lot of techniques and tactics we use that we help people through, depending on who we're talking to. There are some that do recur again and again with people, but I'll give you a few that, you know, your listeners can walk away with the caveat that sometimes it does need to be personalized, but these are the ones that we very generally use with people that works well. One of them is not, it's going to feel like a duh answer, but it really is important to be either with a good therapist and or being part of a DV recovery group. And I want to caution, I want to say, you want to be part of a really healthy DV recovery group. They are all valid no matter where they're at, but some of them are focused on anger and catharsis. And when you're in a custody case, unfortunately, we do find that kind of energy is carried with you, even if it's just tinged, in your tone or the way you carry yourself. And so we actually prefer, when clients start working with us, we ask them to actually get off of social media and not look for advice there anymore for now, or support there for now, because of the amount of anger and catharsis that's there. So if you are going to, what we do recommend is that you find a DV group that is really truly is working on recovery and taking away from trauma. So instead of it being about, I was abused and, and all of this is valid again, and it was awful and catharsis, it's more about, here's how trauma is manifesting. And there's a new field. We have one on our team, as a matter of fact, because I was like, I like this field. And we have a good one. The new field is you can actually find certified trauma recovery coaches. They're not covered usually by anyone's insurances, but if you have the means or you find someone who's rather new at it, they actually tend to many times, not always, but many times have better certifications than CBT or DBT therapists who also have great value, right? But if you read Bessel van der Kolk, his books aren't so much for the layperson, but he talks about the fact that he's not against CBT, but that it's not going to help you. It really doesn't help you recover from traumas.
And CBT is
a cognitive behavioral therapy. So that's talk therapy.
Yeah.
Talk therapy, which, as I said, I think everybody, even when they're happy, should probably have a talk therapist.
I agree.
Stay happy. But then you've got dialectical behavioral therapy, which is DBT, and that's very helpful. But Van der Kolk talks about, just different options. But my point is, when you're working with someone who can do a round of trauma therapy with you, that is going to make at your core a bigger difference in how you appear in court. Now, that kind of stuff takes time. If you do have a therapist who is certified in trauma therapy, for example, that's going to be a 6 to 12 month round of therapy, of weekly therapy that is focused entirely on trauma, right? Yeah. Your case, unfortunately, may take that long, but in places like Canada, in places like mostly in Singapore, it's not going to take 6 to 12 months, right? It's going to be more likely 3 to maybe 9 months, right? Obviously, there are outliers, but I'm just talking generally at the moment.
Yeah.
So you want that as your base. Then what are you doing tactically?
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting, Claire, and people kind of giggle, but then they come back and say, holy moly, you were right. If you're in court, whether you're on the stand, you're being addressed by the judge, or you're in the same room as your abuser, who has perhaps done quite horrible jail-worthy things to you, and you have to be in the same room with them, and you feel like you're going to start crying or lose it, take your tongue and push the top of it firmly against the roof of your mouth. Don't hurt yourself. I say firm. And strong could be a word too, but you're not forcing it, but you are strong. You are firmly pushing your tongue, try it now, to the roof of your mouth. And what it does is it's physiological. It basically stops you from crying. So you might be a little verklempt, as we say, but it stops you from crying. And everybody always looks at me like, what? And this is back from my theater days, by the way, but the clients come back and they're all like, yeah, wow, that works. So do that if you need to. Here's what I say. If you feel like you're losing control of your emotions, do it. Take your tongue and push it firmly to the roof of your mouth for as long as you need to. Don't hurt yourself. Don't hurt your tongue muscles. Don't hurt your neck. Don't hurt. But you can do that quite safely. And it will help. So that's a tactic.
And it doesn't
tactic.
You can't really see yourself doing it either, right? So if somebody's looking at you,
nobody knows you're doing it, right? Nobody knows you're doing it, right? Yeah. I mean, your neck muscles might tighten up, but they don't need to. So just make sure they're relaxed. It's kind of like when you're doing like Cobra in yoga and your forehead is wrinkled and you're all like, wait, why am I wrinkling my forehead? So just release it like that, right?
Yeah.
Another thing I like is to have a touchstone. And the touchstone can be literal or it can be figurative. Your touchstone can be a gemstone or a pebble that you and your child found at the pond the other day, as just really your child is your touchstone. But let's physicalize that, so that, because we know from acupressure that, your fingers, that you're becoming more present when you're with these things, right? So you have something in your lap, easier if you're on Zoom for whatever reason. But even if you're in person in your lap, you've got this pebble, you've got this flat stone, you've got this gemstone.
Yeah.
For some people, they have sort of those perfectly round gemstone bracelets. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And they simply wear it to court, and that way they can hold on to it. You don't want to be fidgeting with it, because the court will be very happy to see you as an anxious person if they see your fingers working it.
Geez.
But you can very subtly be just holding. It's that pressure, Claire. It's the pressure between your fingers that will center you and ground you, remind you why you're there. And then the last tip I'll give you, because we can certainly go on and on, but I kind of want to give a little complete starter set, would be that you have a mantra. And, when we work with mantras with clients, and we're all kind of like, well, let's come up with your mantra so that you are going to be fantastic in court. The mantras often, and we really allow this. So if this is where you're at, this is where you're going to start. They come back to us with like paragraphs of mantra, like a big old paragraph of a 5-sentence mantra, and they're beautiful. And it's kind of like, all right, how do we take this and we turn this into something? And when I first had a mantra done by a woman who actually wrote mantra specifically for this, she said, well, I think your mantra is, I am a fit parent who has full custody of my child. And I was kind of like, no, you don't understand. I'm still going into court. She said, that's your mantra. And I was like, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
So you can but you notice my mantra is 6, 7, 8 words, right? It's a short sentence that I can repeat in my head as I need to, or that I can say in like superpower pose before I go in.
Yeah.
It was always written at the top of my paper so that I could look down and viscerally see it there.
Yeah.
And so I recommend that to clients as well. And we really want moms and dads, when you're in this situation against a horrible, cruel person who is convincingly lying about you and your children, that you're able to have the sort of this basic starter set of tools to just make sure that you're not reacting or playing into their narrative about you in court.
Yeah. No, exactly. Such good tips that you've given. Such good tips. And it's such a terrifying place for people to go, especially if you're not used to going into a courtroom, as I wasn't. How do people get in touch with you? How do they, if people are sitting here listening to this and going, oh my God, I need somebody like Renee, because I don't think I'm going to get through this court case without support. How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can reach us at thecustodyblueprint.com. That's a good place to start with us. Certainly, we also have some Facebook groups. You can find the Custody Blueprint on almost any social media, with the exception of a couple. But, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Threads as the Custody Blueprint. The Custody Blueprint, so you can find us there. If you do go to thecustodyblueprint.com, I'd like to recommend to your listeners that they learn more than what you and I were able to cover today, because we do a free masterclass. It's really like a webinar that they can sign up for. So if you sign up for that, then you can be part of it's about 30 minutes, our masterclass on demand, where you can actually listen to that and get more tips. And that might actually be enough, right? So that's sort of our gift is here. You've got this, take this to your lawyer. But if you do want if you want more support for mindset, if you're like, nope, we do not know what to do with all this evidence I've got, or I love my lawyer, she is awesome, but we do not have a strategy. Then, at the end of, anywhere really, you can get in touch. We've got address and phone number and all kinds of stuff. You can get in touch and we can get you, our consultations are free, and we will give you a bit more advice there before we determine whether or not we can help you.
Yeah. No, that's right. And you do cover global. Like, you've got clients all over the place, as you said.
Yeah, we do.
Although illegally, you are based in the States, and so therefore legally you're not giving legal, information. That's why you've got a lawyer on. That's why when you go to family court, you have a lawyer on the team as well as somebody from, your area to help with. It's a team of people that should be going to court, not
You should
just
always
one
have
or
a
two.
team of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I discovered that, when I did, even though I had my great lawyer, when I got Tina in to work with me, I just could not believe the difference. And that's what we hear from people. And we're grateful to be doing this work. But we do not give legal advice. We don't, in spite of the fact that we do have a certified trauma recovery coach on our team working with our clients. That's not therapy. We are all about court preparation, and that's it. And there are a lot of things people talk to their lawyer about, that you're paying your lawyer to complain about this that happened, and what should I do about this, and what should I do about that. That is stuff that is not actually steeped in legal advice so much as here's what we know will not make you look good, and here's what we know you can do that you'll be fine with. And then there are times when we're kind of like, nope, we can't answer that one. You have to talk to your lawyer. But yes, we're doing the preparation from those 3 pillars: strategy, mindset, and evidence. That's what the custody blueprint is made of.
Yeah, no, look, thank you. Thank you so much today. I know there's lots of people out there that will be needing your advice, needing help, and go to the website and have a look at the free stuff that's on there. And even if it can give you even a few tips and hints that'll help you through court, then that's great. I do have one last question for you, mainly because I'm just keen to understand what piece of advice somebody's given you that you still use today? Collecting these all up.
Gosh, you sort of caught me in this, I'm coaching, consulting mode, and now I just feel like I want to get very personal about something. Imperfect action. I think that's what sticks with me. The 2 phrases that come up that sort of change life for me is imperfect action. When you're frozen, just take action. You can perfect it later. And the other thing that I think I carry with me almost as a mantra, that I couldn't believe it when I found it, is abundance.
Wow.
Because I was left destitute by my ex, and I came in with a good, healthy savings account that was 0 by the time he was done with me. And I found abundance again. So abundance.
It does. And even when you've got 0, you can find abundance in different things.
And thank you for saying that. Not just financially, but
no. But
everything suddenly becomes more abundant once you found that moment of complete freedom and enough recovery, because I don't want anyone judging themselves for still being triggered 10, 20 years later.
Oh my God,
Once you have been recovered enough, you will find something. And for those of you out there who are kind of like, I will never recover from this,
you do.
I am here to tell you that you will, and keep the faith.
Yeah. And if you don't think, even 6 years on for me, right, there are still situations and circumstances that trigger me, but I'm not triggered for weeks. I might be triggered for a couple of hours, and then I go, okay, well, let's just take a breath. This is all right. We can deal with this. And you deal with things in a different way. And you have coping mechanisms, and you set your boundaries, and you just deal with it. It's freedom. The only thing, if I could describe everything in one word, it's it's a roller coaster, but once you're out, it's just a freedom. It's a freedom that I never want to lose. Never, ever again.
Agreed.
So
Agreed.
Yeah.
So much freedom that my ex and I actually kind of get along. Interestingly enough.
Snap. Never forgive him for the things that he's done, but yes, we do.
Yeah. It's
for
that
the sake
yellow
of my
rock
child.
thing, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Look, Renee, thank you so much. We will be speaking again, so watch this space. Thanks. I wish you all the luck with everything.
Thank you, and I'm very grateful for you allowing this topic to be reaching people. So thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast and you would like to hear more, please hit subscribe wherever you like to hear podcasts. If you would like to support us further, share this episode with your friends and family. And finally, drop us a review on iTunes, as I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, and ideas. It all helps me to understand and produce awesome content you want to hear just like this. If you want to check out our past episodes, write to us, appear on the podcast, or for links, resources, and show notes, go to our website, www.strongsingleandhuman.com. We are also on all the usual social media platforms, Insta, Facey, and Twitter. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you back here again soon. Be kind to yourself, and remember, no one is perfect. We're all just putting one foot in front of the other and doing our best. I'm Claire Martin, and you've been listening to the Strong, Single and Human podcast.